The Sportsman's Alliance of Maine welcomes you to Conserving the Maine Outdoors on Legacy 1160 WSKW. Now, here are David and Mike.
Welcome to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with Dave and Mike. Well, Mike, we got another show going today. We have a couple rock stars coming on in the biology world.
Yeah, definitely.
No.
IF&W rock stars.
Yeah, well, in all seriousness, if these two guests were rock stars, where would you put them? I'm thinking maybe Mick Jagger and maybe somebody a little bit quiet and more mysterious with Lee Kanter.
Let's think back. I was somewhere in the 70s hair band era, maybe 80s. Yeah, definitely. Lee. Yeah. Hair, definitely. Like dressed up like Kiss. Type.
Okay. Well, we have a couple of really good guests, and then we have another segment afterwards on a more serious note. We have a couple of biologists to come on and talk about some wildlife issues. Lee Kanter, who's the biologist, moose and deer biologist for the state of Maine, very, very knowledgeable individual on wildlife management, and Nate Webb, who we've had on the show before. He's becoming the rock star for the department. He's becoming a real
both
spokesman.
Rock stars for sure.
Yeah, they both are in their own worlds. Yeah. So we'll have them on in just a few minutes.
Second segment is
we get a more controversial issue coming up after that.
Yeah, the big floating wind platform and its effect on commercial fishing and lobstering. So.
Yeah, that's a very serious issue, Mike. And,
I'm
glad we're bringing it up because I'm growing more and more concerned about the industrialized energy producers coming to Maine and how the impact that they're having on our resources and potentially could have in the future. So it's good to talk about it, figure out.
Yeah, definitely. Should be
where
a show.
Yeah, I think so. But before we start the show, Mike, we always start with, what did you do in the Maine outdoors? And I preface this with, I'm not even going to talk about it because what you did was so much cooler than what I did. So I'm going to defer to you, Mike.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, now we have some ice, so I'm really psyched about the cold weather. And I went out ice fishing a couple times. And, man, we got into the pike pretty good. And, my son, he reeled them all in for the most part. We caught a few. It wasn't like flag after flag, but there were a couple good ones, 36-inch northern pike. And, we didn't actually put them on a scale, but 36-inch pike, I took a guess at 12 pounds. Other people think maybe 15. So maybe the biologists can tell us how much they think a 36-inch pike might weigh.
Well, I don't know for sure, but I know when I saw the picture, I had some...
It was big.
I was like, holy crap, that's big. I mean, it looks, with your son there. I did notice that you put the fish right in front of your son so you can't see your son. What was it that?
No, I could still see him. Well, he's excited, so he bounces around and stuff. And
oh, man, you blamed it on him? What is the matter with you?
That thing was so big. Well, he tried picking it up, too, but I think he was a little bit worried about the teeth in there. If you look in the mouth.
Well, yeah, it looks like an alligator.
Teeth. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I can understand that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, I was exaggerating a little bit. You can see
him.
Yeah, you can see him except
He's
for
fine.
his lower part of his face.
Yeah, you're just trying to give me a hard time.
Yeah, maybe.
I haven't even gotten into your haircut in the sheepdog factor yet, so we'll get into that later.
I was telling the sheriff earlier that I woke up in such a good mood this morning. I don't really understand why, but I did. So I can take it today.
All right.
So you can just keep delivering.
Do you want to sit to my left?
No.
Oh,
no.
All
right. Let's get more serious. Let's get right into this. We have a couple guests on the phone. Let them introduce themselves. I guess we'll start with Nate, and then we can get right into an adaptive moose hunt that the department's been working on, get an update on that. So with that, welcome, guys.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah.
Great.
Dave forgot to put his headphones on.
Oh, yeah. Now I can hear what's going on.
Is this Nate? Nate.
This is Nate. Yeah, I was just looking. I think Lee, if we're comparing ourselves to rock stars, I think he's remarkably similar to Ted Nugent.
Ooh, beautiful, beautiful. I can see him with his electric guitar now.
Oh yeah. And what are you, Nate? What do you compare yourself to then?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think Mick Jagger, that was the reference.
Yeah,
pretty close.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think so.
Perfect.
He's got some moves, I'll tell you.
He does.
I've seen him in front of the committee. He's got some smooth moves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
And Lee, are you with us?
I am. I can't hear anything Nate's saying, so I can't.
Lucky
I
you.
don't know if you guys are
We're good now.
Now you should be able to hear each other. Well, maybe it was a good thing that you couldn't hear what he said about you anyways.
When we talked about rock stars, Lee, he said that you were more like Ted Nugent.
Oh, that's kind of hurtful because I was just thinking of how ironic what you guys said was, because you have no idea how close to the truth you're talking about. Because I am a child of the 70s.
Yeah.
And my brother and I did have a hairband.
Nice.
Ooh, I'd like to. Did you have any video of that? We could put it on the show.
Is that like a Bruce Springsteen headband?
Yeah, that's stuff that's top secret, anyways.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Can you do a little wang dang sweet poontang?
Oh no.
Okay, I'm sorry. No. I just want one request. I apologize. I'm out of here.
That was the sheriff. That was not the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine
Absolutely.
representative.
What kind of show is this?
Well, it's supposed to be a kid's show, but not anymore. We're gonna have to play it at 11 o'clock at night. All right. Well, let's get right into it, guys. Your skills are really top notch, and we want to get as much information into this segment as possible.
It should be known, actually, but Lee is known throughout the entire country as one of the top moose biologists, and we're lucky to have him.
Oh,
actually.
absolutely, absolutely.
A lot of people may or may not know that that the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife of Maine has probably the best biologist group in the whole country. So
it really
shout out to them.
It really doesn't surprise me, given that the amazing wildlife that we have in this state, that we would attract the top quality skills that are out there. And with that, we've given you quite a little segue into this, and we've propped you up on a pedestal, guys. So let's jump right into it. Yeah, let's talk moose. What's going on with this special hunt you guys are putting together? Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, maybe I can just start off, and I'll turn it over to Lee for the details. But I think, as many listeners are probably aware, we take moose management very seriously here in Maine. They're a very important species, not only for hunting but for viewing and to the economy as well. And we're very fortunate to have Lee as a dedicated moose biologist. He's been serving in that role for quite a few years now, and has really taken our moose management program light years forward, and has really added a lot of science to our program and really innovated a lot of new methods that we're now using here in Maine to help inform moose management. And over the past 7 years, he's been leading an extensive research project looking at moose survival and the impacts of winter tick. And in a nutshell, what we found under Lee's guidance and leadership is that winter tick are having a pretty significant impact on overwinter survival of calves going through their first winter. And we believe that is due in part to the relatively high densities of moose that we have in much of northern Maine in their core range, as well as to the effects of a moderating winter climate. So we're working on a proposal that we'll actually be presenting to our advisory council next month to do an experimental, or what we term an adaptive, increase to moose hunting permits in a portion of WMD4 to reduce density and determine whether that approach can help improve the health and productivity of moose in that small portion of their range in Maine. So a pretty innovative project. Is something that hasn't been done, here in Maine previously, but we're pretty excited about it. So we can really go into the details much more than I, and I'll turn it over to him to explain really what the plan is.
Go ahead, Lee.
Well, I mean, Nate really pretty much said it all there. I mean, it's, we're proposing an adaptive unit for things go through. It would be starting this fall and going for 5 years, because you really, if you're going to implement some kind of a management action, you need time to evaluate it. So maybe one of the key points here is that this is a science-based approach to trying to reduce the impacts of ticks. So we've gotten calls for a long time and emails about what can you do about ticks? Can you spray the moose? Can you collar the moose and put tick collars on them? Can you spray the woods, et cetera, et cetera? And the short answer to all of that is, we don't own the woods, first of all. As you know, the core range, as we call it, of moose is across the 16,000 square miles of commercial forest lands not owned by the state. You start to spray some area that large, you're going to not only kill winter ticks, but you're going to take out just about every insect as well, and not a good thing for the watershed, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a non-starter. And then as far as, treating moose, I mean, it's not like the family dog that I have to give an oral pill to once a month, every month. And, so that's highly problematic as well. And, there's some real challenges there. Plus the other thing is, trying to protect 1, 2, 10 moose is noble, but it does nothing for the population. And just to give you an idea, I mean, this past January, just last month, we captured and collared another 70 calves in District 4 to, assess their survival going into this spring. And, that took us, a little bit less than a week to do 70. It's quite an adventure, of course. We hire a capture crew from New Zealand, and those guys got to come out in a helicopter and shoot a net gun over these moose from about 20, 30 feet from the moose while flying. It's a pretty dangerous thing to do, but these guys are professionals. It gives us great information on moose. But you can just see that 70 moose, to capture 70 moose is a huge endeavor. So we do know that when you look at the relationship of moose and winter ticks, and this has been studied for decades, that, animals that subsist at a low density tend to be healthier animals that produce more young. They tend to have much less disease and parasites. But when you put a whole mess of animals together, think about our human population and COVID-19, you get higher infection rates and the impacts on more people. And with moose, we've been fortunate in the state of Maine with our great commercial forest lands that we have a lot of moose. And despite winter ticks in the North Country, we've been able to sustain it to date. But seeing animals die a horrible death from winter tick is not the way to go, when we could be much more proactive and use hunting as a real management tool to use densities and see if that can really impact winter ticks and improve our health of our moose, both in cow productivity and less parasites and disease on these moose.
Yeah. Lee, I have a quick question. Given that moose don't recognize wildlife management district borders,
yep,
how difficult is it going to be for you, especially with the adult males that are traveling during the breeding season, to sort of get an assessment? Do you need to do a little bit bigger area in time, or do you feel confident you can get the information you need from a test like that?
That's a great question, and size is a big deal. And I'll answer this two ways. One is that we can definitely measure it, and that's one of the things I wanted to say, and I'm glad you point that out, because you can't do a scientific experiment, take management action, if you don't have a way to measure these things. And we measure moose densities, the composition, bulls, cows, calves, survival, all that stuff by doing aerial surveys from a helicopter, by putting GPS collars on these moose, et cetera, et cetera. The size question is important because, as you well know, we're always trying to, find the perfect solution and the perfect compromise among all the interested parties. So clearly, if you ratcheted it up and increase cow permits in a larger area, you get more and more people who are doubtful and are disagreeing with what we're trying to accomplish. So the point of this is you take a big enough area where you can demonstrate whether this works or not, and then you can go from there. So the outcome here is you implement it for 5 years in an area that's about 1,000 square miles. You have a way to measure this, and then in 5 years you're going to get hopefully some answer to say, yes, this works, or no, this does not work. Either way, that's going to inform us and then the public to say, well, where are we going to go from here? And that's really important, because a lot of people always think that we have something up our sleeve and that we already know what the answer is down the road. But the fact is, this is an adaptive unit, is something that you implement now, you take action now, so that you're not waiting 5-10 years where you look back in time and go, geez, we should have done this 5 years ago. So I do believe that in that 1,000 square miles, based on 7 years of GPS collared moose and knowing how far a bull moose moves, how far a cow moose and a calf moose moves, that we're going to have a pretty good idea about where we're going to be with this stuff.
I gotcha. So when you say you're going to reduce the numbers, what are you looking at per square mile, I guess, for what you believe to be an optimum moose population?
That's a great question. So, when you talk about and look at North American moose densities, so that's, southern Canada and places like Alaska and, across the northern tier, when you look at most moose populations, you're talking about a moose per square mile. I mean, as you know, they're not like deer. You're not going to fit, you're not going to fit a place that holds 10 deer. You're not going to fit 10 moose in. I mean, moose, the amount of food that they require and the amount of area that they need is just a totally different scale. These are typically more solitary creatures than a deer, and they require a lot of habitat. So, the fact is that, probably in the late 90s, our moose increased to a point that it was a real high point by the turn of the century, 1999 into 2000. Our hunting has always been very, very conservative. In fact, the level of hunting permits that we have, in my mind, and looking at the data, suggests that it does not impact whether the population goes up or down in a given year. What impacts the population is the survival of calves, and that includes getting through their first year to be a year old, and then the productivity of our cows. And we know that since the 1980s, our cows are having half of the twins they used to have. They're reproducing and having calves at a later age. We have less yearlings that actually get pregnant and have calves. And then the survival rate of those calves, because in part of winter tick pressures, there's calves that are born in May that don't make it past their first 4 weeks. You reduce the density of the population, and if you can break the winter tick cycle and you don't have 50,000 ticks on your back feeding on you in March and April, and you increase those survival rates, you have a more productive population that's not suffering from winter tick. And right now, in that western unit, we have more than 8 moose per square mile.
Wow.
And we can draw all kinds of comparisons next door to Quebec, which is right across the border at the same latitude, and see some very, very interesting contrast between how they do things and we do things.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of moose.
Yeah, that is a lot of moose.
And people are like, well, how do you know that? Well, not only have we been flying these helicopter surveys for over a decade, which, believe me, is not. Some people think that must be so much fun. And it's like, there's moments where being in a helicopter flying above treetops is fun, but there's also, so much that goes into it. There's a lot of tension, with dealing with the weather and the fact that, low-level flying is not the safest thing in the world. This year we are equipped with helmets and respirators, and wearing a full respirator on your face with your neck crooked out the window for hours. It's rugged. And we flew that unit this year, both counting bull cows and calves, and then doing transects and counting moose. And, one thing I must say is I was impressed with the resilience of that unit, because Unit 4 suffered from ticks, and we had a real decline over there in the last 5 years with the bull-cow ratios and really dismal calf-cow ratios, and the population took a real hit, but we've had some bounce back. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I just did a little quick math. You said it was a 1,000 square mile area that you were talking about doing this project?
The increased hunt, the adaptive unit area would cover about 1,000 square miles. Yep.
Okay, so and I know it varies from area to area, but you're talking about maybe 7,000 to 8,000 moose.
Yeah.
What are you trying to draw it down to for that area?
Well, I would say that we'd like to get it down lower. So, that's not. I'm not trying to be cagey with answering that question, but
yeah, I know you better.
What we'd like to see is that we're committing to flying that area as well as collaring these animals and following them around. So what we'd like to see is every year that we fly, we want to see the decrease in the population and know that that's being impacted by the actual harvest of cows. We'll be able to see that.
Yeah. A couple of the other factors that may weigh into this more heavily is the type of wood cutting practices and bear and coyote, mostly bear predation on the moose calves. I'm sure you factor in all that stuff, but given that habitat is key in the ratio of moose to acreage and habitat, are you feeling confident that there's still going to be enough activity there to keep generating good habitat, as well as maybe with some new legislation the department has, keeping the bear population in check and its predation?
I certainly don't worry about coyotes, because there's no evidence in my mind. Look, I've done this research now. This is my 8th year of being out in the woods, and we respond to mortalities of these calves as well as adults. And coyotes will come in and they'll scavenge, but there's zero evidence of coyotes taking out even a calf.
Yeah, I've never heard of that myself either.
And then as far as bears are concerned, we spent 7 summers where I hire a group of young wildlife students to walk in. They spend 12 weeks in the woods. And this may be a shock to some people listening, but yes, biologists and their counterparts, every day, 12 weeks spent out in the woods following cows around to see if they have calves at heel. And the biggest problem with calves is that you got a cow that's pregnant, and in March and April, and this is the life of a cow moose, she's still relying on the fat that she gained in the fall to get her through to green up. And unlike deer, when a cow drops a calf in early to mid-May, there's no green up there. So now throw 50,000 ticks sucking blood off that cow at the same time that she's got a fetus inside that she's got to feed to her fat supply, and she doesn't have any green up or protein until sometime in June. So a cow moose that's pregnant and being fed on by ticks, she's losing body condition and fitness, but she'll still give birth to a calf. And when that calf comes out in May, it can be way underweight, or she can have problems lactating, and that calf is doomed not to make it past 3 weeks.
Right.
So, bears,
sad.
When you have an early season where the snow has really receded early, and we see bears out there, they'll scavenge a carcass, especially, on a calf or something, but did they kill that animal? I think there's probably a few that are good at that, but I don't think it's impactful. And then,
interesting.
Regarding your habitat question, I mean, I've flown now 3 times over that area this winter alone. They're cutting a bunch of wood up there in different places. When we did our survey, so when we classify bull cows and calves, you basically are flying around 500-600 feet off the ground, and you're looking at places in this particular survey where there's moose. And I tell you, last time we flew, we were down in the southwestern corner of Zone 4, which coincidentally is part of our adaptive unit. And we're flying around, and Chris, who's my pilot and my friend, is like, where do you want to go? Because it's like everywhere is moose habitat. Everywhere you see is moose habitat. Let's go look at that cut right ahead of us. And moose were coming out of the woodwork.
Interesting.
That's, let's face it, from that elevation in the helicopter, you see a hell of a lot more than anybody else sees. I mean, that's just the way to do it.
Well, I got to tell you, Lee, I am incredibly jealous because you got one of the coolest jobs in the world.
Do you want to fly for me tomorrow?
Don't ask me twice, man. That is so cool. The fact that you get to work with college age students and teach them and be out in the woods like that, and the work that you're doing is so important. I really think you have a cool job, and for that I'm jealous, but that's
grateful and grateful
and grateful.
Well, the fact is we've been fortunate over the last decade where the administration and my supervisors have, given us the resources to do the work, and our partnership with the Maine Forest Service has been huge. But, without having everybody above you say, yeah, go for it, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right. That's right.
And it's a sad time when you're a biologist and you're chained to a desk. And so, I've been given the resources to be able to do my job. So, you have to give credit there. And, that's both the advisory council and the legislative committee. I mean, we've gotten the resources, and we're in good shape right now. And that's a good thing for moose and for the management of moose in the state.
Well, I know that this all sounds very impressive to me. Anybody that's ever seen a moose that is infested with ticks, if you can't get a tear in your eye, then you just don't have the heart, because it is gruesome. You think these animals are injured, they're bleeding on the ground, they're weak, it's just a mess, tick upon tick, and anything that you can do, I consider this to be one of the more humane things that we can do as sportsmen and women, and that is manage the wildlife population in a way that we reduce disease and suffering. And in this case,
and we should point out too
that
all this work is funded by hunting and fishing licenses and the like too. So it is, it's the people that use the outdoors, that love the outdoors, are also funding the outdoors. So
well, for all those folks out there that we have these debates all the time about humaneness of hunting, and this is one time where you can just flat out say that it's more humane to manage with hunters and with the department's biologists to keep a population sustainable and healthy, and it's as humane as those that don't like hunting. And so it's a little delicate to get into that subject with you. I know I don't ask you to answer it, but
I'll certainly tell you that we fully understand that this idea of essentially increasing harvest and hunting cows especially to try to resolve or lessen the tick problem, we absolutely understand it's counterintuitive. And that's for hunters as well as non-hunters. There's no question about that. And it's a very difficult piece to communicate because, a lot of folks don't realize that, in the Northwoods, and even in, like I said, in the face of winter tick, is that we still have, densities that are not heard of in many places. People don't understand that. And as you guys know, you can ask a lot of people from, away who don't even realize how big of an unorganized territories that we have in the state, that we have this amazing place, the commercial forest lands, and that moose thrive in them.
That's right.
So it is counterintuitive, but, here's the situation where, and totally what you said, Dave, which is, death by winter tick it's not pretty. And many, many times, and I've been involved in well over 300 necropsies. Yes, 300, where I'm in the woods by snowmobile, snowshoe, to get to these moose and take them apart to figure out what killed them. And, many of these animals die a lingering death. So day by day, they're getting whittled down. And here's an example. We capture the moose around January 2nd this year. We start doing our capture. We weigh those moose using the helicopter. So we have a starting weight. And this should be a time where the calf is at its heaviest weight. And, normally we see animals around 400, 440 pounds. That's what a live weight moose calf looks like in winter, okay? We're really talking about a 7-8-month-old calf. By March and April of this year, just 12 weeks later, they will lose over 30% of their body weight and they'll look like hell. And then they just succumb to that death because they've lost so much weight they can't maintain their daily function. And then you, of course, see a lot of these animals have tremendous hair loss. Some of them get some really nasty bacterial secondary infections from scratching on their backs and rubbing themselves because of the ticks. And that's not a great way to go.
No.
Instead, the opposite thing you do is you increase your harvest in the fall, you reduce moose densities, you provide opportunity for hunters to have all this moose venison and have a great hunting heritage that we're fortunate to have in Maine. And hopefully you're able to do something proactive about the impact of winter tick.
Wow. Well, this has been a very informational segment, one of the better ones I think we've had on this radio program.
Great segment.
Yeah, I do appreciate both of you coming on. We do have another segment coming right up, and we're going to get on to that. But I do appreciate both of you coming on. This has been great. We'll possibly have you back. I know, Lee, that you know a lot about deer management as well. I'd love to talk with you at some point about that and how moose and deer interact. And so in the near future, we'll have you back. Nate, I'd love to have you back as well. There's a lot going on at the legislature. But we got to jump into this next segment, which is about industrial wind power, offshore wind power. And we certainly want to get into that subject before we're out of time. So thank both of you. And
yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank
Catch
you.
you later.
All right. So,
Mike,
Mike,
we have to take a break, I guess. But this is a production of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. We'd love to have you as a member. If you're not, you can check out sportsmansallianceofmaine.org. You can call the office, and you should join because we're the premier keeper of the outdoors, basically, for everybody. Right. And that includes in the legislative process and a lot of different ways, youth programs. So join us.
Absolutely.
Love to have you.
Well, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Conserving the Maine Outdoors. We'll be right back. Conserving the Maine Outdoors is back. Here's Mike Shaw.
Welcome back to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with Dave and Mike, a production of the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine. And we have a very interesting subject coming up.
I'm excited about getting into this subject.
Yeah, I'll learn a lot, I think, about it. It's basically about offshore wind and the effects that it has on commercial fishing. Yeah. So with that, we have a couple guests with us today. Shelley Wigglesworth, and I'll let her introduce herself in just a moment. She and Mike Perkins run the Nor'easter offshore fishing boat. And if the audience, if you've never gone offshore fishing, or if you'd like to go, the Nor'easter out of Kennebunk is a fabulous boat. It's just so fun with them going out.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I just went fishing on it this late summer with you, and had a great time. Caught all kinds of fish. God, I cooked a chowder out of some of the fish haddock that I caught, along with some shrimp and some scallops. And my mother-in-law still talks about it. I shared it with her, and God, boy, that was good.
They put you on the fish, and they won't stop.
No,
I mean, they're not one of these ones that just
doing.
Anchor off or anything. I've never seen the anchor deployed on that thing. If there's no fish under the boat, they get up and move you right back on top of them every time. Yeah. So, man, they put it together.
So Shelley's resume is very impressive.
Yeah.
She's written for a lot of different magazines and knows her stuff when it comes to fishing. I can't wait to get into this discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have Knoep, Nieuwkerk. I hope I'm saying the name right, Nieuwkerk. He is an offshore fisherman. And, let's jump in. Shelley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. As you guys said, that I work on the Nor'easter with Mike. We run it together. And I'm also a maritime journalist. So I actually write for a lot of magazines, but I specialize in maritime topics and the commercial fishing industry. And because I am immersed in the industry, I work in it with Mike, I have a unique perspective and one that other journalists who are just kind of covering things may not have. So I'm hoping to bring what I know, what I see, and what I write about all together to answer some questions and let you know how we feel about it.
Awesome. Yeah. And Knoep, are you with us?
I sure am.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a little older now. I'm 57 years old. I've been fishing since I've been 13, 14 years old. I've been lobstering, I've been shrimping, I've been gill netting, I used to even tow for sea urchins for a period of time. I've tried all kinds of different things.
Oh, it sounds like we have the right guests on the radio.
Where are you based out of now, Knoep?
I actually fish just down the road from Mexico. We all fish in Kennebunk River there. It's a nice little harbor to come and go out of. A pleasant little spot. I kind of fished out of that area my whole life. Sometimes I go to fish out of Portland, but mostly I stay right around here.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, in full disclosure, before we start this discussion, I think I need to admit something, Mike.
What's that?
I'm not the greatest advocate for industrial-grade wind power. And it isn't that I don't believe in renewable energies. I just think that where you site them matters. And,
definitely.
I've seen mountaintops disappearing and being replaced with industrial wind towers. Some places it belongs, and in my opinion, some places it doesn't. When you start talking about putting industrial wind in the ocean, you're going to impact something. You're going to in someone. And what I think has been missing for me to feel more comfortable with it all is an assessment of its impact on traditional uses of that land and basically our food supply. If you think about it for a minute, we rely as much on products from the ocean for our food supply. In addition to that, you look at solar, and solar's gobbling up agricultural lands throughout the state. There needs to be a comparison in a positive versus the negatives of industrial. So I needed to do that disclosure right up front. I'm becoming more and more concerned as an ex-policymaker on the balance between renewables and what they take from your food supply and from your environment, your traditions.
Definitely.
So I had to get that out there. So let's get started with this. There's a proposal, and I did a little bit of research to do I think 12-tower project. Yeah. So you want to get right into that and tell us a little bit about it and sort of what your concerns are.
Do you want me to start off?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Well, I'll start off. Well, yeah, it is a 12-tower array. We've done a couple webinars on that. And the type of a turbine that they're proposing and putting in is a floating turbine. It's not drilled into the ocean turbine. And a floating turbine, I think in a lot of ways has a lot of, firstly, there's only one site set up in Europe somewhere, and it's a new technology, really. Even though that they know they built smaller ones, they haven't really built the bigger ones. But just by having a floating array, that means that all the cables that they have. When I talked to them about it, they didn't have a clear answer. They talked about dredging the cables into the ground, but realistically, I don't really see how that they can drill the cables into the ground if we have a 9-foot tide swing every day. What that means is that you have suspended wires underwater. If the suspended wires bleed off any electromagnetic current at all, it turns that whole grid work into a dead piece of bottom. So what I would equate it to is more like putting in a hydro dam, or even worse than a hydro dam, because what it does is it removes that whole block from the habitat. It makes it null and void. I don't know how else to put it, but it just makes it disappear, so it is as though it's not there anymore, because nothing can live in habitat around it. They may get some mussels to grow on there. They may get some other form of shellfish or seaweed to grow around it, but that's not really. Yeah, I guess some people can eat the mussels, but it's not what you could get out of it with fishing or some other form of life.
Sure.
Secondly, it produces a massive amount of noise in the water. From what I understand, that people say in Europe is, you shut your motors off over there, you can hear the turbines for miles and miles away, just in the water. The noise that it emits it's a low sonic wave sound, so it travels a long, long distance. So maybe I can let Shelley take off from here.
Well, real quick, I just want our listeners to understand the magnitude. We're not talking about 12 little towers in a half a square mile. It appears from the piece that I read from Maine Public Radio, you're talking about a 16 square mile site, as well as potentially in the background a commercial wind company that has indicated that they'd like to have some sort of project here with much bigger footprint than that. So it's not like you're talking just a tiny little project. It's pretty significant.
And I imagine, and maybe one of you guys can answer this. One thing popped in my head is they must not let boats anywhere near these things.
No, I can't imagine.
They must have multiple big anchor, probably chains or cables.
They do. They talked at a couple different techniques on anchoring, and that in itself that's troublesome too. They're tripod floating arrays, and I would suspect that they'd have to. They talked about putting 3 or 4 anchors out for each array, and they talked about using chain. So not only would that chain, that sound would just reverberate down that chain and act like one great big tuning fork for everything in the ocean. And I don't think that any boats could fish anywhere near close to it. I don't say. They said that in between each one of those arrays, they needed, I think it was a mile between each one of the arrays, each one of the floating turbines. So, yeah, I don't. They talk about being, wanting to work with the fishing industry and the commercial fishermen, but realistically, if they don't let you anywhere near it, then how would you know what it does? They wouldn't. There's no real way to say that it produces fish or doesn't produce fish. But from what I have understood in Rhode Island, wherever that cable is in Rhode Island, that there is absolutely nothing around that cable, and they're proposing using the same type of cable here that they did in Rhode Island. So I don't see where anything would be any different.
Really, I think we could move over to Shelley, because I think she could answer some of these questions. But really, aren't you really talking about allowing an energy company to have single use for that footprint in the ocean? In other words, you're leasing a segment of the ocean, in this case 16 square miles, to one company, and you're pushing everybody else out, because really it's going to be incredibly difficult for anything else to happen and potentially couldn't happen because maybe they've driven the resource out. So, Shelley, can you help us with this?
Well, there are a couple of other things I wanted to just kind of add to what Knoep was saying. These cables that have to go through to transport the energy, they have to go at least 2 meters deep. They have to disrupt the ocean bottom for miles to get this energy, to travel through these cables. And as most of us know, life begins at the bottom of the ocean. That's where the eggs are laid. That's where the tiny microorganisms are. That's where it comes from there on up. And if those habitats, that's where the lobsters are and, all the groundfish, if those habitats and breeding grounds are destroyed and disrupted for miles and miles, they also have to drill through a lot of ledge. We have a very ledgy area around here, which I don't know how they're going to do it. I asked a lot of questions. I'd like to get to that in a few minutes. I asked the Department of Marine Resources, 3 people there in the governor's office, and they referred me to someone named Anthony Ronzio who answered some questions for me. I would like to get to those in a couple of minutes if we have time.
Oh, absolutely.
But, I also asked what these cables are coated with, what sort of chemical compounds are in these cables that everything is... the energy is running through, and they couldn't give me that answer. And I'm just wondering, what are the impact of the chemicals seeping into the ocean and affecting the food chain? Ultimately, we're in that food chain too. So not only is this disrupting the ocean floor, it's going to potentially down the road, because Greg, you need to look at this. They're calling this all a research array. But I call it, is the Gulf of Maine really a guinea pig? Is this worth taking a gamble on? The wind turbine blades themselves are not recyclable. It's going to disrupt miles and miles of the ocean floor. It is, not to mention the dangers that the windmills present to bird life. I did ask about that too, and they said, which specific birds are you asking for? I said, all of them. I want to know how this affects on everything. And I think fishermen are very frustrated. They take off 4 hours to watch a webinar, the last one, if they can, unpaid, and they don't get any answers. And then I try to reach out to people to get answers, and so many of them were left unanswered. As far as, I'll read one to you right now. I asked, what effect does the 2-foot bearing of the cable lines to shore have on the environment? Take into consideration the destruction of the ecosystem's marine habitat and the fishermen that target those lobsters, olive, groundfish. And there's no response to this question at all. They left it unanswered completely. I asked, what is the financial cost to disturb the ocean floor and bury the cables? How will that be done? They left that question out completely, no answer. What are the chemical compounds being used on the cut cables? What studies have been done on these chemicals? That question was left unanswered. I did ask about the electromagnetic currents affecting the lobster and fish, and the response was that they're relatively low voltage cable, and some research has been done, and they're referring me to research. I asked about the piping plovers and the puffins and all of that, and they said this will be a priority in our research topic. This is what we're trying to figure out right now. I asked a lot of these questions. They're just saying, well, we're doing this to figure it out. But my question, and I think a lot of fishermen's questions are, at what cost? At what cost is, are you going to just make a big mess in the ocean? And why now? Why now when fishermen are facing so many regulations as far as the right whale? They're being blamed for that when it's been proven that cruise ships and big ships are killing the whales. Very few. They're getting restrictions because of the whales, the tariffs that are going on, the unending regulations in the industry. They are fighting against a lot. Is now the time to put something else on their plate? Because if we can't have American fresh seafood, all that is going to do is fuel an economy in another part of the world where they don't have regulations.
Yeah, I think.
And one last thing about the regulations I'd like to say is I would like other people to really think about this. There are more regulators in the fishing industry than there are fishermen fishing. How does that make any sense? I'm going to shut up now. I'm going on and on.
No.
I'm going to back off and let Knoep jump in.
That's what the show is all about.
That's right. I want to ask a question because I think this is this is a legitimate question that really needs to be answered. Have we had a debate where Maine people have weighed in and a majority of people have said we want to move to this type of energy? What I feel like is happening, first of all, Maine's a net producer of energy. We produce more than we use. Yet we're seeing this massive solar, wind, and other power development. The argument that, and I referred to the CMP corridor, in which the biggest argument is this power is just going to Massachusetts. Well, isn't that true of every project that is being created in the state of Maine? It is going into a New England grid, and that energy is going out of state. Have Maine people weighed in? Do they understand that? Do they continue to want to create industrial?
One of the things I'd like to talk about is the actual cost of the wind turbines. I think one of the guys I talked to, John Williams, and he told me that for every mile of cable is like I think it was like $1 million a mile or some ridiculous thing like that. So just in the cable line, I think they talked about wanting to go in. I think it's 25 miles from shore, so there's 25 million, and then the cable up in between the array. Each one of those towers in between the array, I think that was another 12 or 15 miles. So you're talking almost $50 million here. Maybe I got my math wrong, but a pile of money just in cabling. That's just the cabling. And now you're talking the cost of the turbines themselves. I think you're talking at least $75 million for 12 turbines. So now with some ratepayers, I think what people are paying now per kilowatt is like 6 cents a kilowatt for their power. What they did in Rhode Island is they started off at, I think it was 14 cents. 25 cents. They started off at 25 cents kilowatt, and then they were supposed to go up 3% a year for like 10 years or some 20 years. So in the end of 20 years, they're paying almost like 50 cents a kilowatt. Nowhere's any of the ratepayers have had any say about what their costs are going to be for this energy. So yeah,
actually, the people are taking the energy, the wind farms,
I am.
because they are not happy to. In Rhode Island, this is Block Island, Rhode Island.
I think that the ratepayers ought to have something
hold on,
to say
guys.
about this.
One at a time, please.
That more than doubles your electric bill. I have a $75 a month electric bill. That would turn that into almost a $300 a month electric bill. I'll let you guys take it from there.
Well, Shelley, I want to get back to my point about how we produce our energy. There are a number of ways to produce renewable energy. Harnessing that from offshore wind or from the top in an industrial wind power development on top of our mountains, I still feel like we haven't had that debate. There are other options out there. The most efficient power produced in the world is nuclear.
Right.
And you've never had a single debate on whether we should compare the two and Maine people determine what our future is going to be. If Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and those states are the ones that are driving the need for more energy, why don't they produce their own damn energy? Put a nuclear plant near New York City or Massachusetts or in Connecticut.
It was dawned on me, and I've heard this argument before too, probably the easiest and most efficient way to say produce the energy is to not to use it in the first place.
Bingo.
So if you put $50 million into, say, spray foam insulation on people's homes, we have the oldest house stock in the country, and then you give them a heat pump or whatever,
Mike,
that would save so much energy that I can't imagine that, hundreds of windmills it would take hundreds of them to save.
Mike, in golf, Mike, we call that a humdinger. You nailed that one.
Follow the money trail is my what I would say. Follow the money trail because and that's another thing that fishermen are really up against. Fishermen, as I've pointed out before, are outnumbered by the amount of regulators in the entire industry. They don't have the money to fight these big companies that want to cash in on this energy from the windmill. And they are foreign companies, a lot of them. I did ask about that, too. I have some articles coming out, one in National Fisherman and one in the York County Coast Star, and a couple of other places where I go into this more in depth, and you can find those on my own Facebook pages and websites. As soon as they're up, I'll link them up. But follow the money trail, because that's another thing that I kind of got a vague answer about. The Jones Act is something that we're supposed to have as many American people employed to do all of these things. But the countries that have all of the information, and this is what I was told, they have, they're consulting with them, and other countries will be brought in. And as we were talking about before with Rhode Island, with they're having so many problems. I'm kind of jumping around here, but their underground cable has been disturbed. It's come up. It was supposed to be buried. They've had a lot of problems, not to mention their energy costs going up tremendously, continuing to go up over 3% every single year that the wind farm is being used. There's just so much here, and they want fishermen to get on board because they want to say, well, you told us this and you helped us to do this. I think fishermen have made it very clear they don't want to be on board with any of this stuff. I did ask the governor's office if they had consulted with Block Island in Rhode Island and talked to them at all in their studies to see how the people in the city, they're not happy about this, how they are taking them to court, and they haven't done that yet. They told me they couldn't give me any more answers. They couldn't answer my any further.
Well, it appears your dog's not happy about it either.
Sorry, my dog is.
Anyway, the fishermen do not have the big money lawyers. They don't have it's fishermen against, and what really, really irks a lot of us is this is all under the umbrella of being good for the environment. But there are so many things, and I think a lot of people who may not be informed think, but this is better for the environment. At what cost? This is not better for the environment. They're destroying the environment now, all in the name of research, which at this point there are so many things at stake, not to mention the livelihood of commercial fishermen. Well,
I think we're going to have them back as guests because I want to get more into the subject matter. We're going to run out of time here in a minute or two.
Sounds like there's another good show about this.
Yeah,
sure.
I really want to get into this more, these fishing issues, commercial fishing, but also recreational fishing.
And just a real quick thing while it's on my brain.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, David.
That's okay. Go ahead.
We've fought these fights, the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine in the past too, where big money outfits come in, like PETA and the Humane Society of the United States with the bear referendum. So we know the pain there. There's no doubt. We're always on the monetarily. We're always on the short end of the stick.
I would encourage you, Shelley, and I don't want to get his name incorrect. Knoep.
Yep, Knoep.
Our organization is very powerful. We're influential at the State House, and we're going to continue to push for a debate about our entire energy package. I'd encourage your members to join. The way that we work is that we survey our members, and based on what they tell us, we go forth and try to work on those issues. Encourage folks to join. That's the only way to really be effective in the political process now is to be part of an organization that you align with. And in this case, I am, as a state leader, I've been in politics, so has Mike, for a long time. We need a statewide debate on energy, and one in which Maine people feel like they're in control, not industrial energy companies from out of state that want to harvest our resources. Because
or
at some point, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And at some point, we're going to lose our identity.
That's
as
a great
state.
point you made, David. Was that any more energy that we produce now in the state of Maine? We already produce more than we use.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
it's going somewhere else.
Yes,
so maybe they should deal with it.
Yeah, let them conserve energy or produce more of what they need.
Yeah.
And
I
with
noticed that there's no turbine arrays off of New York. I don't know. They're the ones that need it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, we have to cut you off. I apologize. The show, we've run out of time. Thank you, and we're certainly going to have you back. Even if we have you back to talk about other subjects, I think your passion comes through in what you have to say, and we do appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Mike, I'm fired up now.
I know. Me too, definitely.
Yeah, we really got to do something to get this under control.
At least all the cards should be on the table.
Yes, exactly.
We can't just do a little bit here and a little there and this there and that there, and then all these things combined turn out to be what could be a giant mess.
A cluster. I call it a cluster.
Well, that came to mind, but the word after usually.
Well, Mike, you hit a humdinger when you said, who's talking about conservation? Let's conserve resources. Let's be more efficient with the resources that we have. And you nailed it. And I think that's a theme that we need to talk about a little bit.
And Efficiency Maine, they do a good job, but they have limited funds.
But that's not where we need the efficiency.
Yeah.
In New York, they consume energy at an alarming rate. Connecticut, they're a big manufacturer. They want this cheap energy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're not talking about conserving.
And it's not all that cheap, really. Yeah. So,
all right. With that, we're out of time. Thank you for those listening. Join the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine and have your voice heard.
We're stronger with you.
Yeah, that's right.
You've been listening to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David Trahan and Mike Shaw on Legacy 1160 WSKW. Join the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine by going to sportsmansallianceofmaine.org and like us on Facebook.